Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Tim Lee. I'm a research analyst at Red Cloud Securities. I'm delighted to host a Red Cloud webinar on gold exploration today. We will hear from Anthony Moreau, CEO, and Mark Bradley, VP Exploration of American Eagle Gold. During today's webinar, they will provide an overview and outlook. Then we will take questions. You can type your questions into the chat box at any time. We'll get to as many as we can. Before we kick things off, first we need to discuss the fine print. During this American Eagle Gold webinar, forward-looking statements may be made. I would direct listeners to the company's forward-looking statements outlined on page 2 of American Eagle's corporate presentation. That can be found on the company's website, americaneaglegold.ca. For Red Cloud Securities, Inc., I would highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only. It should not be considered a solicitation or a recommendation to buy or sell securities. We note that this call does not consider the particular situation or needs of individual investors, and participants should rely on their own investigation and seek their own professional advice before investing. Please see our most recent research located on the Red Cloud website for specific disclosures related to American Eagle. I'll start off here with a quick comment about a general theme related to today's presentation. There's an industry-wide theme of digging deeper for gold exploration targets, and particularly in Nevada. It's been a lot of exploration work done in the state, and many of the near-surface targets have been kind of worked over. Thus, we're increasingly seeing companies focus on buried targets. With this comes an increasing reliance on geophysical tools and other approaches to help guide drilling in the search for these deposits. With that said, we have American Eagle presenting today. Their team has a strong background in the gold business, including experience in the discovery of buried gold deposits, and they're now exploring, looking deeper for the next generation of gold mines. With that, I now turn it over to Anthony and Mark to update our audience on the company.
Thank you very much, Tim, and thank you for everyone that's watching this presentation. I appreciate your time, and Tim, I appreciate those forward-looking statements. I'm not going to tell you to buy the stock. I'm just going to present you the story. Our stock has underperformed in my view, and part of that is due to the gold price just being relatively flat. But another reason is there's a lot of competition out there. There's a lot of white noise, and if you sell a $1 ounce gold at the top of Mount Everest, you're not going to sell any. So my job right now as CEO is to get in front of as many people, let them know that American Eagle Gold, which is traded as AE on the TSX Venture, is around. Tell that story. I believe it's a very compelling story. I'm very proud of it. And it's the reason why I left IM Gold, a great company to work for. And this is the reason why Mark Bradley, who has as much of experience as any geologist in the Elko, Nevada area, decided to join us as well. So I can tell you a bit about the story, a bit about Nevada, and then Mark's going to talk a bit about the geology, and we'll open up the floor for Q&A. I'm going to keep this to around 20 minutes. Now, people have only so much attention span, and if you can't tell a story in 3 minutes, why tell it at all? Forward-looking statements, Tim went through them. So American Eagle Gold, we're traded as AE on the TSX Venture. We are looking for not just any property in Nevada. We're looking for a tier 1 district. Now, if you look in the world, where do you want to explore for gold is where you want to mine gold. There really is 3 countries where you want to be wholeheartedly. You want to be in Australia, you want to be in Canada, and you want to be in the United States of America. Anywhere else, it's very hard to find a gold mine. And once you find it, you don't want to be taken away from the government. So these 3 locations, Australia, US, Canada, are places where they have favorable permitting. And of all of them, I believe Nevada is the very best district, specifically in the small area, about the size of Massachusetts, where we are. There's no area in the world, with the exception of Witwatersrand and South Africa, there's so many clusters of tier 1 gold deposits. When I say tier 1, I mean deposits that have over 10 million ounces of gold that can be economically mined. Deposits that are economical in today's price environment, whether it's $1,000 gold or $2,000 gold. There are a lot of projects in Nevada in the world. They have a resource on them. Everyone wants a resource. I call these retreads. A lot of these deposits you see in Nevada, they're run by juniors. They have history of mine drilling. let's say 80,000 meters and 600,000 ounces of gold. I call them retreads. They're a derivative on the price of gold. You have to wait for gold to go up. Barrick, Waterton, Newmont, Anglo, they wouldn't get rid of deposits unless they didn't see much of a future on it. Now, the big dig on our company is there isn't a whole lot of history of drilling. I see that as a positive. There isn't a history of misses. We are right next door to Giant. People haven't properly explored that until now. And what we are after is a company-changing deposit, something that's going to be massive. So instead of waiting for the price of gold to go up or someone like Barrick to buy us, we want to be proactive and we want to find it. You can look at us essentially like, investing in Barrick's greenfield deposits, investing what Gold Rush was 10 years ago. We're going to go out there, use the same approach that Newmont and Barrick did to look for that tier one deposits. And let me remind you, the only companies that have deposits of any that are meaningful at all are Barrick and Newmont. And that's because they put the proper approach to look for them. They do the front end exploration because they have time. They do geophysics and they look for those giant deposits. So that's what we're doing. We have the location, we have the people, and Mark Bradley, who's on this call, and we're going to start drilling imminently. So again, I'm going to talk about the area where we are. This area in Carlin, Nevada, is the home of 3 mining giants. Until now, you might not have heard of American Eagle Gold, but I know you've heard of Newmont, I know you've heard of Barrick, and I know you've heard of Franco-Nevada. Within this small area, there were born 3 of these kings in the gold mining world. So if you haven't heard of American Eagle Gold or Carlin, I know one thing you have heard of. You've heard of the 49 gold rush in 1848. You had around 250,000 people. It's the biggest emigration in U.S. history. They traveled across North America looking for the mother lode in Sacramento. They mined gold there for many years. The peak mining there was in 1852. They produced about 2.6 million ounces of gold. What all these individuals did is they walked over the Carlin deposits. Since then, 151 million ounces of gold have been mined in this little area where American Eagle Gold is. And why this was all missed and wasn't found for another 110 years is because it's a Carlin-type deposit. This is the only area in the world where you see this type of geology. And why these are unique is 2 reasons. First of all, back then when you're looking for gold, you panned it. So people probably panned there. But unfortunately, this gold is encapsulated by pyrite and it floats. And you cannot tell it's gold until you have geochemical analysis, which wasn't really discovered for another 100 years. So you can see here the big gap from when the Sutter Mill was discovered in Sacramento in 1848 to when the Carlin area was first discovered. And that started with John Livermore. He worked for Newmont, and he made the Carlin mine discovery in 1961. With Goldstrike, that was the beginning of Barrick, and that's in 1986. It wasn't until another 30 years after the Carlin mine was discovered that the Pipeline mine was discovered on the Cortez Trend, that this whole Cortez area became the next big boom for the Carlin area of Nevada. And this Cortez area is exactly where American Eagle Gold is. There's one thing a lot of geologists like Mark can't agree on. And what they agree on is that there is a lot more large deposits to be found in this area of Nevada. But the oxides, the open pits, discovering those, they're gone. You got to do underground drilling, which hasn't really been done much. So that is the future, and that's what our focus is at American Eagle Gold. And the Cortez Trend is where these underground deposits are likely to be, specifically, we believe, underneath our property. So I'll just show you this area of land. So all these different mines here, they're all owned by Newmont and Barrick, except for ours, the Golden Gate. The Carlin Trend on the top right, that's where the Carlin area was discovered. And then again, in 1961, you can see Pipeline. Sorry, 1991, Pipeline was discovered. And every 10 years since that, there's been another great discovery about 10 kilometers apart. So when Golden Gate was actually permitted, so not permitted, was staked, at the same time Pipeline was discovered, it was 25 kilometers south of Pipeline. It had no interest of anyone. 10 years after Pipeline was discovered, Cortez Hills was discovered. Another 10 years after that, Gold Rush was discovered. So 30 years ago, we were 25 kilometers away from the closest mine. Right now, we're about 4 or 5 kilometers. That's a 45-minute walk. Gold Rush, Barrick, they're almost right on top of us. So again, the plan is to wait until they're looking for more greenfield opportunities or be proactive and do the discovery that otherwise Barrick would do. And that's why we have Mark Bradley on our team. And again, There's no better place to look for gold or mine gold than in Nevada. So I showed you the whole Carlin area here. I'm gonna zoom in here on the Cortez trend. Again, I believe, Mark believes, a lot of people believe this is the future. This is the lifeline of Barrick and Newmont where the growth is coming. And it's true. Gold Rush was just discovered 10 years ago. It's just coming online, I believe, in this quarter. It's just 5 kilometers north. And here you see Pipeline, Cortez Hills, Gold Rush, and 4 Mile. Each of them have over 10 million ounces of gold. 4 Mile actually has around 5, and 4 Mile will be coming online in the next couple years. So as you can see, everyone was found south of one another, moving a trend on a collision course directly with Golden Gate. So our plans to drill underground, find something similar to Cortez Hills, Gold Rush, and 4 Mile. We have a lot of land. We completely border Barrick's property. And the reason why we call ourselves Golden Gate, it's a combination of Golden Trend and Garden Gate. And it forms a complete gate across the whole Cortez Trend. And a lot of people from the Elko area, they're actually from the Bay Area. So what better bridge to compare it to than the Golden Gate in San Francisco? So right here, I'm showing you Pipeline, Cortez Hills, Gold Rush. Now, what these all have in common is they're all giant deposits, tier 1 deposits. But like I mentioned earlier, the deposits here are being found in a southern line, but they're all a little bit deeper than another. It's like pearls on a string. So let me show you the next slide. Pipeline, discovered 1991, 10 kilometers south, Cortez Hills. Now, Cortez Hills, a little bit deeper. It's a combination of an open pit and underground. 10 years after that, you have a pure underground play in Gold Rush. We're hoping, this year, next year, 2023, we'll find the next pearl on the string, the next large gold deposit. Now, Gold Rush changed everything until Gold Rush was discovered. And again, Mark led the team that made the discovery. Mark's on the phone. There were underground deposits in the area, but what they're extensions of the open pit. What you have here in the area are, they call them erosion windows. So there's oxide, people mine the open pit. When they're done with the oxides, they drill deeper, and they start hitting the sulfides, they start hitting the gold, the underground mines. So with Gold Rush, it was the very first one that wasn't started with an open pit mine. And we believe that's the future of kind of finding these deposits, again, in the area. So if you look at the Cortez gold production, it's been going up like this. The first discovery was in 1968. They didn't produce a lot of gold. And then right there in 1991, you can see that's when the Pipeline discovery was made. It came online in 1996. And since then, they've averaged about 1 million ounces of gold in this small little 25-kilometer trend for the last 25 years. Now, if you can narrow in further onto our property, so we're getting further and further into our property. This is a focus. That's our property size. It has over 7,000 acres. And as you can see, we're right next door to Gold Rush. We're right next door to Cortez Hills. Gold Rush is about 5 kilometers away, 45-minute walk, and Cortez Hills is 10 kilometers north. Both are world-class gold deposits. And we're on the fault zone of Cortez Hills, and we're in the Red Hill anticline of Gold Rush. So we're looking for similar gold deposits as both of those. And again, we border Barrick's entire property. So just to give you an idea, here's an aerial shot of our property. You can see Golden Gate there, and you can see how close we are actually to Gold Rush and Cortez Hills. We're right next door. If you want to be looking for gold, it is extremely tough to mine economically. The closer you are to infrastructure, the closer you are to the big boys next door, like Barrick, like Newmont, the better the chance you have of a liquidity event. It's about taking advantage of the economies of scale. So I showed our property. Here's Cortez Hills. Here's Gold Rush compared to ours. I'm going to do some long sections, some hypotheticals. So again, pearls on a string. You got Pipeline here. It's all open pit. Cortez Hills is dual. And what we're looking for, we're looking to get through the overburden, through the upper plate rock. And we have 2 targets we're going to be drilling in the Cortez area. You can see that, the northern Cortez and the southern Cortez targets. Mark will speak more about it. And this is what else we're looking for. I mentioned we're actually looking on the Cortez fault zone and the Red Hill anticline. So this is what we're looking at here. We got Gold Rush just north of us, and we have Golden Gate. So we're looking for a deposit similar to Gold Rush that's a little bit deeper. Now, I always get asked a lot of questions. The two main questions I get asked, why doesn't Barrick buy you? They're attached to you. Well, if you bought every property south of you, you'd eventually end up in Mexico. That's kind of tongue in cheek, but it's kind of a blessing and a curse in terms of where exactly we are in Nevada. This is the richest area in the world to be looking for gold. Don't take it from me. Just look at the stats. They produce 1 million ounces of gold in the Cortez area alone. So everywhere that Barrick, Newmont drill, it comes up with gold. So for them, they're better off economically doing brownfield exploration. They do step outs from Gold Rush started off with the Red Hill, then they found Meadow, then they found Crow's Nest, and then north of that they found 4 Mile. So they're better off just expanding their resource instead of doing blind drills. Now that's where we come in. That's where it creates a business proposition for our shareholders. We are essentially a greenfield exploration arm for this company. We're doing that work, and our shareholders will benefit if we find something. Now, the other question is, why wasn't there ever drilling here before? It's a bit of a misnomer, a misconception. There was drilling here before, but what people did is they did shallow drilling. They're all looking for oxides. Now, what we're looking for here, I mentioned this a bunch of times, it's a tier 1 deposit. Now, I'm a fisherman. When I go out in the Atlantic Ocean and I look for marlin, I don't bring a fly fishing rod. That's not going to do me any good. What I need is a bent butt rod. I need to get deep into that ocean. I got to get that marlin, that prize. Now, the prize in this area is a tier 1 large underground deposit. I'm not going to be doing shallow rotary drill holes, which is essentially the same as fishing for marlin with a fly fishing rod. I'm going to put a bent butt rod into the ocean. I'm going to put a deep drill hole into the ocean to intercept that ore body, and that's what our plan is. So enough about me. The star of the show here is Mark. I believe in this company for 2 reasons. I love the location. I love the area. But without Mark, I wouldn't have as much confidence about it. You can have a Lamborghini. I don't have one, but you can have one. But if you can't see, it's worth nothing. You can have a great deposit, a great area of land that I believe that we have. But without that expert, that geologist to run that exploration plan, to know what they're looking for, you're not going anywhere. Now, Mark Bradley, I asked him this. I go, why'd you join our company? He said, Tony, I didn't come to your company, hang out in the desert, or kick stones. He honestly said to me, he goes, I see a lot of the same potential I saw in Gold Rush 10 years ago at your property. And that gave me a lot of confidence. Mark didn't just work for Barrick that made the Gold Rush discovery. He led the team that made the Gold Rush discovery. He has pedigree, he has experience, and he knows how to find these underground deposits. And again, Gold Rush was really the first one that made a deep underground deposit discovery in the area. So who better to be on the land next to that property than Mark Bradley running the exploration program? So I want to welcome Mark. And what I did promise, give a little bit more history in terms of the trends and the mines in the area. And no one knows this area of Nevada better than Mark. So take it away, Mark, and thanks a lot for joining.
All right. Thanks, Tony. Yeah, this slide here obviously covers the same area that the earlier slides Tony was showing, but it's basically showing the evolution of exploration trends in Nevada over the years. If you look at going from the original Carlin discovery, then to South Arturo, Gold Quarry, Emigrant, all the mines on the Carlin trend, they were all open pit discoveries. They was all in the 80s. That was the golden era of finding the big open pit Carlin type deposits. A lot of them came online, and right up to the discovery of the McCoy deposit, everybody was focusing on the open pit. That was the goal. Then around 1990-91, you started seeing a change in the exploration history and the discovery history. Pipeline really was the last big pure open pit discovery in Nevada for Carlin type deposit. From then on, the exploration hits were increasingly deep underground targets, beginning with Meikle, which was stepping out from the Gold Strike pit in 1989. Then Turquoise Ridge discovery between Getchell and Twin Creeks in 1992. Cortez Hills was as pointed out, it's kind of composite discovery. It did have an open pit component, but then a deep underground component as well. And then subsequently Gold Rush, 4 Mile, those are all pure underground plays. So you can see basically from the history of discovery here, the trend is going underground. Basically, we found all the obvious big open pit targets, and the future of Nevada is underground mining. So it's the logical target type to be going after. I guess you can. So to look for deep targets, obviously you won't have obvious things sticking out at surface. You won't be able to just hit an outcrop and say, hey, there's gold in this. We just drill here and we'll hit a big deposit. These things are covered. They're usually covered by pediment gravels. They're covered by volcanics. They're covered by the upper plate silicious rocks. So in order to really develop targets, we need to rely heavily on geophysics. And here we used a couple of different types of geophysics. One was 2D seismic. And this is the technology, of course, that's been in play in the oil and gas field for years and years. It's one of their basic tools. In recent years, it's been developed to the point where we can now look for shallow targets. Obviously, the oil guys are looking for targets 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 meters deep. We now have techniques in place where we can look much shallower than that. We can look within the upper 1,000 meters or 1,500 meters and start developing a model from there. And the seismic basically helps us look at the kind of structures, particularly low-angle structures that we might have in the area. We're looking for folds. We're looking for thrust faults. We're looking for the kind of structural architecture that's favorable for Carlin-type deposits. And seismic is a really powerful tool for that. The other major geophysical tool we've used is CSAMT, which is basically magnetotellurics. It's basically electromagnetic survey technique. And this helps us identify some basic types of rock that are underground based on what their electrical response is, whether they are conductive rocks or resistive rocks. And we found through experience that the lower plate carbonate rocks, which are our main hosts in the area, tend to be strongly resistive compared to their overlying silicious rocks or the overburden. So we can use those contrasts in electrical conductivity to identify some basic rock types and improve our odds of hitting our favorable hosts at depth. Okay. So this is the southern CSAMT line we ran this spring and summer. And this is basically just illustrates what one of these CSAMT sections looks like. And in the hot colors, magenta, red, purple, that represents strongly conductive rock. So that's most likely the upper plate rock or the overlying volcanics. What we were targeting is the cool colors, basically the blues, the greens. That represents more resistive rock, which means it's more likely to represent a lower plate formation. So you can see here in this line, we have a strong resistivity high at depth. It looks like it's what we would say it'd be rooted. It's not just, as you can see, we have some other resistive units here, but they're all kind of disembodied little blobs in the upper part of the section. That may just represent some alteration in the upper plate rock or some perhaps a chert bed, something that might be more resistive than the surrounding rocks. But if we see deep rooted resistivity highs, that gives us a feel for, hey, this could actually represent a lower plate section. So that's obviously something we'd be targeting. So our overall program, we made heavy use of geophysics. We also pulled up some of the historic soil geochemistry data. Now, this won't, as I said, we can't count on an obvious target at near surface to drill a gold high. But looking at the different elemental signatures like arsenic, antimony, mercury, elements that are commonly associated with Carlin-type deposits, we can identify areas where maybe we had leakage along structures, which may be coming up from a targeted depth. So that helps us define our structures, helps us identify areas that may be more fertile than others. Based on this geophysical data, the geochemistry, and some surface mapping, we identified two major areas of interest, the northern and southern Cortez targets. And those will be the focus for our initial round of drilling. So the drilling we have in mind, we basically got three goals. One, we want to get to the lower plate rocks. We want to get to the favorable carbonates at depth. Two, within those carbonate rocks, we want to see the kind of structures that we want to see for a Carlin-type deposit, which would be folds associated with thrust faults, overturned folds. The axial crests of those folds tend to be good places for concentrating mineralization. So we want to see that type of structural architecture. And three, of course, we want to see alteration and mineralization that's indicative of a big system at depth. So even if we don't hit the big bonanza on the very first hole, we see clear evidence that there's a big system there, and that'll help us vector into the big target. Then we subsequently also have drilling in mind. Our initial drilling will be focused on these two targets, but we also have future drilling that we want to conduct on the eastern part of the property, which, as you can see, is directly on trend with the Red Hill Anticline, which is the major structural control at Gold Rush and 4 Mile. So basically, we have a lot of favorable areas to test here.
Thank you very much, Mark. This is just an idea of what we've done in 2021. It sums up what Mark spoke about. A lot of investors ask me why haven't we done drilling yet. Investors want to see grams per ton, but where we are, and I've mentioned this over and over, I believe we're in the richest area to be looking for gold. But that doesn't all come easy. It's underground. It's expensive to drill. And we want to make sure that every dollar we have, as much as possible, is going towards drilling. We want to give ourselves the highest probability of success during that drilling. So again, like Mark, we got to do the proper geophysics. And just again, echoing what Mark said, geophysics allows you to get as good of an understanding of what the rock looks like underground before drilling, so we can have the highest probability of success. This market that we're in, it's like finding a needle in the haystack, finding that right junior company to invest in. What we do with the proper location, the proper methods, and the best people like Mark, we make that haystack as small as possible for investors. We follow our timeline, and we're going to start drilling very soon. I'm available for any investors that want to speak to me. Now, again, these are some of the key highlights. We're doing 3,000 meters, 3 or 4 holes. We're hoping to expand that drilling well into 2022. We got our permits given a while ago, and Major Drilling's hired to be the drill contractor. I would have loved to start drilling in September, but because this area is so hot where we are, it's been very difficult to find a drill contractor. But they are coming next week. They're going to put holes in the ground, and we're going to start seeing results into January. So again, drilling is imminent. That is our biggest catalyst. And I have to do a job of just talking to investors and getting the world out there. Again, let's use that same analogy. You can sell $1 ounce gold bars at the top of Mount Everest. No one's going to buy them. The same goes with a great junior mining company, which we believe we are. So I'm going out there, talking to as much investors as possible, screaming at the top of the mountaintops, and hopefully get those sell orders wiped out and get that stock up. Because I believe we are undervalued, and I believe there's a big opportunity on our property. We want to find the next tier 1 deposit. This is my email. That's my number. That's our address. And you can watch any videos online. I'm always happy to speak to investors. Very excited about this property, and I'm excited about our team. So I'm going to open it up for Q&A. Feel free to ask any questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Tony and Mark, for a very informative presentation. We'll now start the Q&A portion of the webinar. Just a reminder to everyone on the line that you can type your questions into the chat box at any time. And we already do have a few questions. I think first, kind of looking at a little bit of the history of the project, and obviously it was previously separate properties that you've brought together, but who were the previous owners of the Golden Gate property?
Well, the owners were, in this area of Nevada, the play is you have local prospectors, and they claim the area, they use this land. What they do is they option it to different junior exploration companies, major companies to explore on. Their business model is different than ours. They get a small fee for renting out the land, but what they end up in the end with is an NSR. So they decide to sell to a team like us that they believe is going to move the project forward. And those two owners, one of them is David Shadrick. David is on our board. Next to Mark, there's no one in the area that knows mining more than David. He specifically knows land even more. He's combed over it. He's been desperate for people to drill on it because since 1996, when he claimed it, he believes there's a big deposit. And Mark can speak to Dave as well. The other owner of the Garden Gate, which we combined with the Golden Trend, his name's Kip Tompkin. Again, he's similar to Dave. He's a local prospector. He staked the land. He sold it to us. When I first joined the company, our number one goal was to merge those two properties together. There's no need of having a Golden Trend and a Garden Gate. There's a lot of synergies to putting them together. It creates a whole border south of Barrick. It's over 7,000 acres. It gives you a lot of kick in the can to find that deposit. So those are the two underlying owners. In terms of who's drilled on there before, there's a myriad of different companies. I don't believe that anyone's done it the proper way. I'm not going to name names, but the previous owner at Garden Gate, they did mud rotary holes. So if you want to get the best drill hole possible, you start with your drill core, your diamond drill core. Then you go RC, and then you go mud rotary. They did mud rotary. Gives you an idea if there's some gold in the ground, but doesn't allow you to know exactly where it is. And they're all shallow drill holes. On our property, a bunch of on Golden Trend, there are a bunch of different owners. The most recent one was a major gold mining company. They had it for 9 months. Now, it gives me a lot of confidence that a major gold mining company actually liked our property and wanted to drill at it. It almost gives me more confidence that they actually left, because you tend to want to do the opposite of what these majors do in terms of exploration. And why they left, though, it wasn't because they didn't believe in the property itself. They just weren't working on enough information. They didn't do the geophysics. They actually drilled on Barrick's property, which is property trespassing, and they walked away. But that created a huge opportunity for us, for our shareholders, and we're lucky enough to get that land. Because if you look at the area, there's no land available. There's definitely no land attached to Barrick. Definitely no land attached to Barrick to the south on the trend where all the other deposits on the Cortez trend are getting discovered.
Great. And we have a couple of questions related to kind of the targets that you're looking to drill themselves. How deep is the lower plate target on Golden Gate?
Yeah. Basically, on the west part where we're starting, we actually don't have a definite answer for the depth of the lower plate, because we have to estimate from geophysics. The previous drilling didn't get to lower plate rocks. So right now we're anticipating that we should hit lower plate rocks between 400 to 600 or 700 meters depth. And that, I know that sounds, for some people, that sounds, well, that's pretty deep, but you have to look at what they're doing at Gold Rush and at 4 Mile. 400 meters is an average depth to target there. I mean, that's pretty standard. In fact, at 4 Mile, it's close to 900 meters depth from surface. But because these are large, robust, high-grade deposits, the underground economics work pretty well. I mean, the average grade of Gold Rush is 10 grams. The average grade they're mining, going to be mining in the deep part of Cortez Hills, is 12 to 14 grams. So, they're deep targets, but they're high grade, and that's what makes them very attractive.
Great. And then we did have a question related to that. Obviously, with the deeper target, even if there was significant gold found, what grades would be required to be economical?
I think once again, using the analogy of what we've seen at Cortez, to be economic, we would want to see 9 to 10 gram average head grade. That's particularly if it's going to be refractory, which it probably is. It's going to probably be sulfide mineralization, not oxide. 10 grams is probably a pretty reasonable rule of thumb grade to form a large, economically robust underground target there.
But again, that depends on what you want to do, and what grade is economical is really a function of what the gold price currently is.
Yeah, sure.
Again, with Cortez Hills, just adding to the conversation, that's economical when you want to build that giant facility here. But I'm going to tell the truth here. We're not in this business to eventually build a mine and produce. Our business is to explore. It's to make a discovery and create a liquidity event for our shareholders. Yeah. So if we do that, then you kind of merge with your economies of scale to the north, and possibly your grade can be a little bit lower because you are taking advantage of the facilities that are at the Cortez complex that are attached to our property.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, with the existing infrastructure, you can certainly lower your head grade and still be economic. So,
great. And then looking, obviously, or drilling deeper, and with core drilling, what do you expect the cost per foot to be for the deep drilling?
The average cost in Nevada, and this is probably going to sound high for the Canadian audience because they're used to, much higher production rates, given the ground they're drilling there. But core drilling tends to run anywhere from $105 to $130 a foot, depending on how challenging, which would be roughly $350 a meter, up to $350 a meter, depending on just how bad the ground is and how deep you have to drill. Nevada ground can be very challenging. The upper plate rocks can require quite a bit of drill mud, drill additives to make sure the hole is open, make sure you keep recovery up. So it tends to drive costs up higher than what you would see in the Abitibi, for instance. So
it's correlated with the opportunity that you have in the area there.
yeah.
We're just finding a drill, just trying to get major drilling to come to our property. Every drill, all the drillers, they're all used up, and that speaks volumes to the area that we are, because people are continuing to drill even at those prices. It's a driller's market right now.
Yeah, just as an illustration, I actually was talking to one of the managers at Board Longyear, ran into him in town the other day, and he said that their rigs are already booked up for all of next year. I mean, already. They haven't got through this year. They're already completely booked for next year. So it tells you just how active the drilling scene is here.
And another question related to drilling, but how many holes, looking kind of further ahead, if you do have a discovery, how many holes would you need to drill to define a 1 million ounce plus resource that might gain the interest of a producer?
Once again, it's a matter of just how much you want to advance the deposit before, like, say, you get a liquidity event or marketing event. Given where we are, I would say that if we get tag into a big system, basically we'd be drilling to establish system extents. So it would probably take maybe 24 to 30 holes to try and define just how far the system extends. And then if it looks like you're getting some decent grades in there, it may be of interest at that stage. Even it may be of interest to Nevada Gold Mines or the equivalent guy. It all depends on how far you want to advance it. So,
you look at our company and you see there hasn't been a lot of drilling. So people right off the bat think there's a lot longer. Everyone wants to get to a liquidity event, especially big shareholders. It's hard to get rid of your shares.
Yeah.
And you look at it and you think it's going to take us a lot longer than other companies that have a resource. But those companies that have a resource, they got to get to about 1.5 million ounces, and they got to do a lot of drilling. What we need to do, because there is such a history of these giant cluster ore deposits in the area, what we really have to do is just identify that there is an ore body there.
Yeah.
And then after that, you're kind of off to the races. So I actually think our liquidity event is actually a lot closer than actually companies that actually have a lot of drilling in the area.
Yeah. And I think if you do it right, it doesn't take a huge amount of holes to demonstrate you got a big system. Looking at Gold Rush, what we did when we made the initial discovery hole, we started drilling a pattern of step-out holes up to 600 meters, 700 meters away from the original discovery. And we drilled a dozen holes, and 8 of them hit good, solid mineralization. That's the kind of thing, if a big company sees that, that'll pique their interest in a hurry. So it could be as little as one additional year of drilling could define a big enough target to be attractive.
Yeah, once you have a deposit, it seems really easy. We're gonna drill it. It's making that initial discovery hole that is the challenge.
Yep.
And Mark, maybe you can just talk really quickly. That was a really interesting story you told me of how when you guys made that discovery, it was just from an initial water well hole you put in the ground.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, Red Hill was the first part of the mineralization we'd identified, and we were drilling that for a couple of years, and we had a 1 to 2 million ounce resource, so it was still looking like it was decent. But then we had a hiatus on drilling because there were legal challenges coming up from Cortez Hills, and they wanted to make sure Cortez Hills got permitted and developed without any problems. So we had to hold off on drilling for a year at Horse Canyon, and we thought, well, we do need a water well. We need another source of water. So we kind of stepped out about a mile or about 2 kilometers south of where we were drilling at Red Hill. And we're basically on trend for the mineralization. So we figured, hey, we need to test here anyway. And so we drilled that hole we were originally going to drill it like 300 meters deep. And then so, well, we better drill it deeper because we don't have any tests there. So we drilled it to about 650 meters. And about 400 meters is where we hit mineralization. It was like 20 meters of 30 grams. So that told us this is, we were starting to deal with something a lot bigger than we thought. And so that one hole basically changed the whole picture of what we were looking at there, from dealing with a kind of a moderate sized, maybe marginal economic deposit at Red Hill. All of a sudden we realized, hey, we're dealing with a giant system here, because it wasn't exactly the same kind of rocks, the same kind of structure. It had to be part of the same system. So, and that's what, one hole can just turn everything around.
Absolutely.
And Mark, really quickly, there was a couple of drill holes, I believe 2 to 4 before on our property. Just explain to the viewers, why those weren't drilled in the proper area.
Yeah, I mean, they were, the holes that were drilled, and this is back in 2004, 2005. And I think they were drilled on the basis of some sketchy geochemistry, and particularly looking at where they were drilled in comparison to what we were seeing in the CSMT, it looks like they were drilled in, you can see that they were conductive rocks all the way down. So it was you knew it was going to be either overburden or upper plate rocks, but they didn't have that geophysical data at the time. They were just drilling purely on some surface geochemistry and some interpreted structures at surface, maybe some regional mag data. So they did the best they could given the information they had at the time, but it turned out to be, in places where they couldn't get out of the upper plate. One hole actually looks like it came very close to getting in the lower plate, but they bottomed it in a dike. But looking at the rocks immediately above the dike, it looked like it's what we recognize as a transitional unit from upper plate to lower plate. So I'm really wishing they'd taken that hole another 50 feet deeper. And they could have gotten through that dike. They might have popped right in the lower plate rocks. They stopped it just short. But that's another aspect to bring up, is that we have a much better understanding of the stratigraphic section than they did 15, 20 years ago. Because of all the work that's been done at Cortez, we know much more about the upper plate section and the lower plate section than was known back then. So we have a much better feel for, knowing when we may be getting close to lower plate, getting in the lower plate, and knowing when to take the hole a little deeper to get into where we need to go. So,
great. And we did have a couple questions here, more stepping back and looking at the corporate and funding side of things. But how much cash does the company have? How much are you funded for? How many meters would you be funded for? And when would you need to raise additional funds for further drilling?
Yeah, I'll take all those questions. And I see the other one about the number of shares that I have. So I'll address all of those. So first of all, learned a lot of things was at IAMGOLD. One of the most important things I learned, which is pretty obvious in retrospect, is always to look after your balance sheet. So right now, for current funding, we have around $2 million in cash in our bank account. We have 5 million shares of ore finders, Geological securities. Let's call that $350,000. So our current drill program is going to cost between 1.1 to 1.3 million US. Let's call that 1.6. That leaves us with $500,000 of extra buffer zone. So we're going to wait to see how our drilling is. And we always want to leave ourselves with 1 year of working capital ahead. We're very confident we would have been doing all this geophysical work if we weren't confident about our future drill program. But we're going to take it one step at a time. Our focus, Mark's focus right now, is to make that intercept to hit the lower plate rocks. We did our last IPO at 20 cents. I do not plan on doing it, any kind of financing below that. I'll see what happens, but I do not plan to do that. Now, in terms of how many meters, 3,000 meters what we're drilling. But again, it's hard to get those drill rigs on our property, and we plan to keep them there. So in January, February, once we have a better idea of what those drill holes are looking like, we plan to expand that drilling, expand it further on the Cortez Fault Zone, and expand it further on the Red Hill Anticline. In terms of how many shares I have, I bought 1 million shares at 10 cents at the initial raise when it was private, around a year before we went public. I knew about this company for a while. That's why I joined it, and I put some skin in the game. $100,000, call it what it is, but I have a kid, relatively young, and that's a big investment for me. But I do believe in the property, and I believe in the oil group. The parent company that kind of helps run everything. So I believe there is a big future ahead.
Great.
I saw who owns other shares besides management. We have some institutional holders. We have a big family of owners. A lot of the same owners that own some of our sister companies like QC Copper and Gold and Basel that have done very well. They also own shares in American Eagle Gold, and they're strong shareholders. If you've seen that our price actually went down, it wasn't from our shareholders that actually invested in the IPO round. what we did when we went public, there's a lot of ways to go public. You do an IPO, you can do a CPC, which is a shell company. And what we did for this one, which I probably wouldn't do again, it's a plan of arrangement. A lot of these plan of arrangement, you spin out an asset. So usually you spin out, a property. But how this company was created years ago was an exchange of shares between American Eagle Gold and a company called Ore Finders. So Ore Finders own 10 million of our shares. American Eagle Gold owned 5 million of Ore Finders shares. That was equal valuation back then. But as you can see, Ore Finders shares aren't doing great right now. And as everyone knows, these junior companies, they don't provide yield. So what they did, instead of having Ore Finders hold on to 10 million shares of American Eagle Gold, to provide a yield, an opportunity to buy Ore Finders, they give half of those shares away as a dividend, 5 million shares, to Ore Finders shareholders. Now, what happened was the price of gold went down, Ore Finders shares went down. So instead of selling Ore Finders, how are you going to get some liquidity? How you get some cash? You're going to sell off your dividends. So that was our shares. So the people actually sold our shares that caused them to go down were a lot of those Ore Finders shareholders that actually got our American Eagle Gold shares as dividends. They didn't buy into the company, so they got rid of them. So since then, we believe a lot of those shareholders who weren't part of the company for the real reasons are out, and a lot of strong shareholders are part of it. So moving forward, we're hoping to get through those sell orders and get the company up. And again, that's through drilling, that's through positive results, and that's from me marketing it, doing things like this.
Great. And I guess one question I'd ask very quickly, you did recently acquire a second project, Cerros Rojos, further to the east in Nevada. What do you see there, and what are the plans potentially for that project?
I'll talk about how we got it. Mark maybe talk about the plans, but we've looked at over 100 different properties. The Ore Group that we're a part of, it's about making smart, creative deals, ones that bring value to shareholders. We're close to doing a couple deals, but I didn't think it would bring shareholders value. And what we did is we talked to a local geologist, and all these geologists, they have properties they've always wanted to work on. And had a meeting with a certain geologist from Nevada, and he told me about this property. He said he worked at Freeport back in the 90s. They did an initial drill hole on it. They hit oxide grade from surface. And I said, Dave, what happened to that property? Who owns it? He goes, it's in eastern Nevada. It's not close to Elko, and nobody wanted to be there, so they just left. He goes, I think it's still available. He said, in fact, I go back there every year. I'm so obsessed with it, I kick stones on it. I go, how do we get it? He goes, all you have to do is stake it. Staking costs $28,000. So we staked that area. Now we have an area in Nevada that has a history of hitting oxides from surface, albeit the geology is a little bit different, but it gives us optionality. And further down the road, we are going to drill there. Now, Mark, maybe you can talk more about the geology and how it's different from the Carlin type deposits in our area.
Yeah. I mean, the mineralization in eastern Nevada does have some similarities to where the big Garland deposits, but it tends to be in a different part of the stratigraphic section. Anybody who might be familiar with the Alligator Ridge deposits in central Nevada, it's very similar to those. So, we don't anticipate finding a huge elephant there, but we do have excellent opportunity to find near surface oxide open pitable gold. So it may not be gigantic, but could be very profitable, if we find the right structures and be able to develop it a little further. So
great. And I guess one kind of minor follow-up question. Obviously, I had mentioned the Ore Group and baseload. Is AE, how is American Eagle associated with baseload?
So American Eagle is not associated with baseload per se, but they're under the Ore Group umbrella. What the Ore Group is Toronto focus. Mining umbrella. They don't own the shares of these different companies, but we have a cost sharing approach. So we share a similar CFO. We share resources on the office space, on administration, on legal, and that actually reduces our costs a lot. It reduces baseload's costs a lot. I'll be honest with you, it's not a full-time job to be a CFO of a junior mining company. People might tell you it is, but it's really not. So if we can avoid paying someone $150,000 and spread that cost across 5 different companies, well, that's only $30,000 is costing American Eagle Gold. That's $120,000 extra that we can put in the ground. So from the cost sharing approach of some of these resources, that's how we're related to baseload. I talked to James Sykes, who's the CEO there. He is an absolute rock star. He's made a ton of discoveries. I think he's close to discovery at baseload, and now he's running a company called Metal Energy. So I also speak to him quite frequently because he has a lot of advice to share, and that's how we're related.
Great. Well, thank you again. I guess one closing thing, but just to review, what news would we expect to have over the coming weeks and months from American Eagle?
Well, if Major gets to our site and puts those holes in the ground, I can hardly wait to actually say they are actually drilling. There may be an acquisition on the onset. If we're working on one, that could be something that could be up in the next 3 months, possibly. Something else we're working on, assays eventually coming out. It's not just about drilling; it's about seeing what those drill holes give you. So assays are lag about 8 weeks. So we'll be continuing to come out with assays, probably from February leading up to the end of March.
Great. All right. Well, some very exciting things to look forward to from American Eagle. I'd like to once again thank Anthony Moreau and Mark Bradley from American Eagle for the presentation today. And thank you everyone out there for tuning in today as well. Just a reminder that Red Cloud Securities will be back tomorrow afternoon when we present UEX Corporation Thursday, December 2nd at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Everyone have a great day.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you for everyone for watching. And I see a lot of investors that I'm familiar with. Feel free to reach out to me. You have my email. You have my number. Always happy to talk and tell you about what we're working on. So thank you very much for keeping updated on this story.